All right, let's go ahead and get started. Officially 10:30. So welcome everybody and welcome to today's webinar. It's Building a Sustainable Future, Affordable Housing Innovations. As always, today's webinar is being recorded. It will be uploaded to the YouTube channel, which you can find by either searching Spear on YouTube, or you can go directly to our website at eepartnership.org. Under the news section, you'll find it in our resources page. Once you're on there, you'll find a link to our channel. Today's webinar is eligible for the ICC CEUs, but you must be present for at least 3/4 of the presentation. Within about 72 hours, you'll receive a course evaluation email from Kathy Lawrence. Please complete the survey and send it back to her to receive your course completion certificate. That will have your title and course ID number on it that you'll need when you're reporting your CEUs to ICC. Lastly, I will be monitoring the chat as we go through. Please report any technical difficulties you might be experiencing with the presentation. The Q&A feature is also open. We'll be holding questions till the end of the presentation. So thanks again for joining us today. We have Sean and Vanessa with Levven. I'll let them introduce themselves shortly. Just real quick, a little bit of housekeeping as we always do. Who is Spear? If it's your first time on here with us, Spear is one of the 6 energy efficiency regional organization offices throughout the country. We cover Texas and Oklahoma. We are member-based. We're a nonprofit. We promote and advocate for the adoption of the Energy Code and ASHRAE 90.1. So we're here to help anybody that has some questions with that, adoption issues. We do a lot of training with building officials, third-party inspectors, developers, architects, and the like to help try to navigate through Energy Code and the understanding of what's required. I put the next 2 slides up here just real quick with just kind of looking at lighting controls, what it says in the code book. Of course, residential controls and requirements, there are interior controls, dimmers, occupant sensors, other controls, exterior. There are some wattage allowances, some automatic controls and override controls as well. And in commercial, we have occupant controls, luminaire level controls, monitoring controls, and of course, occupant sensors, depending on and specified by type of room. So Sean and Vanessa, if you guys are on here, I will stop sharing my screen. I will allow you guys to take control.
Thank you so much, Randy.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here with us. And I appreciate all this doing webinars for me when the time of my voice having an issue. So I appreciate you guys being on here. So I'll let you share your screen and you guys can take control from here.
Perfect. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Sean Vo. I am the National Director of Sales at Levven Electronics, and I'm joined by...
I'm Vanessa Wright, the Head of Sustainability.
And we're excited to share with you how Levven is more than just a smart switch. It's a smarter switch to a better building material. Now, Levven's been an electronics manufacturer for over 12 years. We design and manufacture controls for Arctic Spas, one of Canada's largest hot tub brands. So naturally, we crossed paths with home builders and built great relationships along the way. We proudly design and manufacture our products in Canada. In 2012, a friend of the home building industry challenged us to solve a problem they had. They build 85% of their walls in a robotic factory and wanted to seal up the walls in the factory. Code required the wires in the wall to be inspected prior to drywalling, and they needed a design to remove the wires from the wall. So, with that, we believed new homes should be switched right. Does that mean that the way we're switching homes today is wrong? Well, some might say what's wrong with the way it's always been done. We can take a look at the way it's always been done and appreciate the joys of construction. Now, Randy and Vanessa, I know this might bring back some fond memories for you both.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
You know, Bob Ross would say there's no such thing as a mistake, but happy accidents. And what we call here is a little bit of a peekaboo.
Yeah, overcuts and drywall, I would say that's 85 to 90% of all of your switches and your outlets. And it's just such the normal, you're used to it, but when you really start to think about the penetrations and everything else, it's kind of ridiculous.
Well, and if you were to take that plate on off and take a look at something that's a little bit more of a testament to abstract art, what are your thoughts here on this?
I would say the interior of the box has less mud than usual, but that overcut, you can see that's just a weakness in the drywall now. I mean, that cut goes way beyond the box. And that's going to be a full drywall repair. So you're gonna have to get your drywall punch over it. And yeah, that's always going to be a weakened spot for the homeowner as well.
Well, and the thing I do have to appreciate is that even when it's centered and front and foremost there, you still have a little bit of wanting to see what's inside the package.
What's frustrating is that one's simple enough. You could seal it with an arrow barrier will seal it, but also you could caulk it. But if the homeowner ever takes that plate off to do anything with that switch, it's just going to pull that caulk right off and damage the drywall. It's just unfortunate thing to pass on to the homeowner.
Well, and once you do mud it and you make it look a little bit prettier, it's not the same feeling that you would want out of a brand new home.
No, those aren't even level. That's wow.
Well, and having the one plate jointed, I mean, let's have a party and we can just have the whole gang over and have a +1.
That looks great. Yeah, that's special right there. Wow. Um, I
That's
would
always
hate that as
always
a
been a
homeowner.
big question of mine to look at something like that and say why.
But
And for the most part, these are items that could be taken care of with designing how people walk through the house and where they're wanting the switches, but having 5 gangs of switches there, I mean, you could space it out a little bit more if you weren't bound by the stud you had to put the switch box onto. Other
and
instances,
that's
what's
a
that?
deadbolt. That's a deadbolt. So that's probably a door to a garage or something. That's the first thing you have when you walk in. It's just so much. And again, they're not level. They're not straight.
Well, in instances like this where we're having a little bit fun and enjoying being inside the drywall,
Wow, that looks broken. That's just terrible.
and then let's have a little fun hanging outside of it as well. How would you go about fixing something like this?
I mean, that box isn't even flush to the drywall. To fix it, you'd have to cut around it, pull the box off of the stud. It's those boxes they have a nail going up top and a nail going up bottom, but you'd have to detach it from the stud and probably needs a new box. That's just the problem is that switch plate would never sit flush to the wall. It's sunk on one side and it's above the drywall plane on the other side. That's terrible.
And when you have the switches, I mean, it becomes a decorational item. So more is better, I guess. And at the end of the day, we all just want to be close together. The funniest thing about this is having that security panel there generates heat, and it's going to give bad readings to that thermostat. It gives me the warm fuzzy feeling there of seeing all 3 of those placed right next to each other.
I would almost take that personal if I bought a home and that was in there. I mean, that's just terrible. They're all different colors of white too. And that the middle one's matte, the bottom one's shiny, and the top one doesn't match either of them. And they're not level. Again, that is horrible.
I mean, Randy probably agree with me. Those are all just white. I only see one color there.
Yeah, but I agree with Vanessa. It's an eyesore in my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, the fun part really happens when we take a look behind the wall. And as the installers get comfortable using poly, we have a little bit of a story of the guy that likes to use just a little bit of poly, the guy that gets a little heavy-handed and likes a lot of poly, and of course, just like the 3 little bears, the guy that polys just the right amount.
A love-hate relationship with polyfoam, right? Second poly is a whole task within itself, and it can be so important to the build process. This is why I'm a big fan of Aero Barrier and TNS Solutions and some of the stuff they're doing, because they say, oh, if your poly's done right, you don't need an area barrier. I heard that all the time. And it was like, no, I think you do, because you can't count on every trade doing this right. You can't count on poly being consistently applied throughout the house. And you just don't want to fail that blower door, and you want to be able to dial in your ACH. And with the variety you just showed, I just don't feel like poly's the end all to sealing your envelope.
Well, and you bring up a great point there, and it's something that I know that talking with you and Randy leads me to ask: if everyone just did their job right, what is wrong with what we're doing today?
It's just counting on every trade doing their job right, and how much responsibility is on each trade to get it done. And especially when it comes to things like your envelope and measuring your air changes per hour and doing your blower door tests, every penetration in your drywall or your top plate is just, it's going to lower that. And you can count on second poly and count on every trade to do it right, but I mean, even if each one of them has 2% of mistakes, it's going to add up, and it's just going to further degrade your ACH. And time spent, every day a job sits for most builders between $150 to $250, right? So if you're having to fail a blower door, call back that inspection, call in 3 trades in between to make sure they do their part on sealing the envelope, it's just it's a waste of time and money.
And it really begs to believe that at the end of the day, what we're doing is filled with waste and issues of quality. This can truly be solved with the lighting control system that Levven offers. And it brings me to talking further about what exactly is Levven. We believe that homes should be switched right. With that, we separated the switch into 2 operating components: the rocker portion that people interact with daily, and the power control relay that switches the power. The power controller installs inside a junction box, connecting the power wires to the load that it controls, such as a series of lights or ceiling fans. Switches send an on-off or dimming command wirelessly to the power controller using radio wave frequency, the same way your car key communicates to lock and unlock your car doors every day. Multiple switches can connect to a single power controller to deliver multi-way switching. A power controller can operate a single light or a series of lights, as shown here for the 4 kitchen lights. Individual switches snap together just like Legos to form multi-gang switches. Since they are mounted with screws, you can mount the switches wherever you want. All Levven switches are smart right out of the box, which allows homeowners that want to use energy-saving automations to have access to them. Now, that's the technology as it sits in there, and relaying it over to construction itself. Well, here's a comparison example. The first picture is the front door of a wired switch rough-in. The second picture is the front door of an identical home roughed in for Levven controls. If you notice, one of the studs has literally been cut out and all the wire running to it, whereas the home roughed in for Levven control has none of that. I share this because it shows a stark contrast between conventionally wired homes and a Levven home. Everyone truly benefits with improved build quality. Historically, there's been a lack of data to prove installation and operational savings across many green building technologies. And we could have just said, hey, take our word for it. We know we're right. But turns out the team at Levven, we're all fans of data, much like Vanessa here and Randy. And so we wanted to partner with SHRIA, which is the Smart, Sustainable, Resilient Infrastructure Association, and SAIT, the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology, in the pursuit of validating the impact that Levven has on construction and the environment. And so that study comprised of 30 homes equipped with wireless switching and 30 homes equipped with conventional switches to quantify the amount of wire, material, and labor needed for both conventionally wired homes and Levven-equipped homes. And we set a ground basis for our project objectives we wanted to accomplish, and that was to quantify the amount of wire, materials, and labor used. This data allowed for a comparative analysis to determine the embodied carbon impact and complete an operational energy comparison. It's a very vast amount of objectives that we wanted to get completed, and it really led us to understanding how we affected the embodied carbon of the homes. If you take a look here, the end result was the Levven on-off controller, as shown by System 1, conserved nearly 50% of the embodied carbon in comparison to traditionally wired systems. The study was a cradle-to-gate study, which translates to from the point of manufacturing to the installation of the product. I know, talking with you, Vanessa, that embodied carbon is starting to become a little bit more of a thing here in the States.
It's becoming more of a thing globally. Yeah, many European countries, as well as New Zealand, I believe Canada is doing a certain amount of it, but they're looking at more and more about your embodied carbon tax. If you build something and it releases embodied carbon for X amount of time, X amount of rate, you should be taxed for that when you could have reserved that carbon and kept carbon lower in your operational end of it. I think that we're a little bit behind some of the other G7 summit members as far as where we are with carbon. And I don't know when, but the United States will want to jump on catching up. And I think it'll be a big issue that builders and in general are going to be looking to soon. Anything they can do to start reducing that embodied carbon, the more the better.
Well, and I can
Agreed.
add a little bit to that as well, because I was at the National Codes Conference just last week, dealing with just basically the energy code. This stuff is coming. It's going to be written into codes in cycles in the future. But this is a big topic. It was a big topic. There were several breakout sessions and presentations on just this topic. So that's dead on.
I mean, I tell you what, I had to read Chris Magwood, Bruce King's book, probably full 2 times before I really could wrap my head around, and I've been an energy rater and a builder and all sorts of things in between, but understanding the operational and embodied carbon and the effects and impact, it was mind exploding how important some of that information really is. And it's only right for us to get on board with trying to reduce what we're doing.
And with coming to understand all of this, you really do have to absorb every step of the installation process to fully understand the effects that you're having. And the Shria study was great to give an overall bird eye view of it all, but it really wasn't enough for us. We were able to quantify the greenhouse gas emission portion, but Levven wanted to compare results from each stage of the switch installation. We packed our hard hats, we went out on the road to Arizona, New Mexico, North Carolina, and even here in Texas to collect more data than we already had. We compiled it to create our switched rate report. Now, I'm not going to go through the full report here today and bore you guys with a bunch of data tables and sets, but if you'd like a copy of this report, please feel free to reach out to Vanessa or myself after the webinar for access to that. But if we take a look at data from a 2,400 square foot 2-story home, we removed 26% of the wire used in that home. We also reduced the overall installation by 6.7 hours, which led to the rough-in being completed in a day, giving back that build cycle day to the builder to utilize. And Vanessa, you mentioned it earlier, that there's a cost associated there with the house sitting in production.
Absolutely. Every day out, especially if we're outside the build cycle time, you're going to budget for, whether it's an 80-day build or a 120-day build, whatever it is. And any day outside of that, especially is at least, I would say on average, it's $170 to $200 a day for the builder.
And as you look on the screen here, you'll see all the different segments that we break into in the data that we were able to collect. To validate the time it takes to do the actual installation, we recorded video of every part of the installation process to be able to support the data we collected. There's not really a true peer review process for manufacturer claims for the most part, but this comes pretty close. It leaves no room for holes in our argument, and leads me to actually talking about the drilling of the holes in a home. Trades are proud of the hard work they do, and as they should be. There are aspects to the installation process that cause more wear and tear on the body than necessary. If you've been out in the field and watched the process of drilling for wire pulls, you know it can truly be a backbreaker. This gives us the opportunity to ask, how can technology help with that? Well, in this case here, we reduced 21% of the holes needing to be drilled throughout the house, which had an additional benefit of a reduction to top plate penetrations. You see a guy using one of those drills to push through all the studs. I mean, that is strenuous work and labor right there.
And it's penetrations in your top plate.
And this is exactly how we help electricians do less strenuous tasks to achieve the same outcome. And if we take all of those points together, it shows that our data supports that we're able to save a build cycle day, reduce embodied carbon for the lifetime of the home, eliminate rework for switches during construction, all giving the added benefit of homeowners having access to automations that reduce energy usage. I mean, with every switch being smart inside the house, homeowners have the ability to put timers on any switch to help reduce energy consumption. I get yelled at by my wife for leaving the bathroom fan on, and so I have the ability to now put a 5-minute timer on it, set it, and forget it. I don't know about you guys or who's the light cop in your house, but I'm constantly yelling at my 7-year-old to turn off the lights as he's running by. And now I have the ability to put a timer on there to say, hey, okay, that pain is no longer part of my household.
Right, right. I also we lost my dad last year, and my mom's alone for the first time, and we have Levven on a timer in her front office because she's like, oh, I want to make sure nobody thinks I'm home alone. So we have lights that'll go on and off at different times just so she feels like her house doesn't look like she's alone, you know.
Well, and it really helps the families that have medical conditions. I speak to this personally as someone who has a family member that has become wheelchair bound. Having to call an electrician and move the light switch to a lower height level it's costly. I've had the pleasure of being able to install these switches over in my family member's home to drop it down to the height that gives her the access to be more independent. And it's truly something that's been personal to me, and being able to live through that and have that in my home.
Same. Whenever you first gave me an experience pack, I installed that for my dad who had recently become chair bound, and he had a little fob that he kept in his chair basket, or even when he was in his walker basket, and he could turn the master lights on or off from anywhere, and he loved that. He thought that was the coolest thing. Still made him feel like he was in charge of the lights, you know? So I really appreciated that on a personal level too.
And it leads us to really saying it's not just Levven talking about this. To maximize energy savings, lower power bills, and benefit the environment, every switch in the home needs to be smart. And it needs to be standard and not an upgrade. That's not my opinion. It's what the public wants. The majority of home buyers state that energy efficiency was an important factor in deciding to buy a house. I mean, taking a look at these statistics, 93% of the people who did do energy efficient renovations are satisfied with the results of their renovations. And I'm thinking about all the people that have purchased Levven to be able to install it in their home to give them those home automations for energy savings.
I agree. You know, one of the reasons that I wanted to become an energy rater after working at Habitat for Humanity was they had Tex Energy Solutions had done a study on our homes, and we had this amazing study done by TXU and Tex Energy to show that our heating and cooling bills for the Habitat for Humanity homes for over a year, not one home's heating or cooling bill went over $25. And I was stunned. I was just like, that's incredible. But we built such an efficient home that we could pass on those savings. And with home energy efficiency renovations and home energy efficiencies such as Levven, that's energy efficiencies that everyone can put in their home, everybody from all socioeconomic backgrounds. It's not something just for brand new home construction. It's something that is great to go into renovations to be able to upgrade current homes with, you know, smart technology. A lot of home energy efficiency renovations are really, really expensive. And I would say that Levven's got to be one of the most cost-effective ways to start your energy efficiency renovations on any home at any age.
And I do have to thank Randy at the very beginning for bringing up code, because technology is rapidly evolving. There's been updates to all categories of mechanicals in the home. And Vanessa, you've mentioned this several times to me when you were on the other side of the table, that electrical really hasn't had as many innovations as, let's say, HVAC and plumbing. But
Right.
what makes all this possible is organizations like the NFPA and the NEC recognizing this method of lighting control. I mean, they've made several updates in the last 4 iterations to the NEC 210.70 for technologies such as this.
Right. And you're right that I don't feel, you know, with HVAC, I mean, goodness gracious, in the last 15 years, whether it's, you know, manual J's, heat loads, just the way that we've done HVACs and the efficiencies within the HVAC world, it's just been a dramatic overhaul. Same with water efficiencies, whether it was PEX piping. I mean, that was huge. Tankless water heaters, now heat pump water heaters. We've got so much technology coming into those two main mechanicals. But a whole house system. We all, you know, in building science, we study the whole house system, and electric is lagging as far as innovations and being a part of that movement of getting to where the energy efficiency and change in innovation in innovative ways is part of its everyday, the way the other mechanical trades have to deal with it.
Now, I did want to include some fun B-roll from other adventures we've had out in the field and taking a look at additional changes that would have to happen for those that don't use Levven. And this is by far one of my favorite photos here. I mean, Vanessa, how would you go about fixing something like this?
This was such a great little townhome, and this was just, it's got an overcut. It's got that door frame with the stud right next to it, leading to the garage. And that was, I guess, the only place they could put the outlet. I mean, you can't fault the electrician. You can't fault your tile guy. But to make that, what I would do for my homeowners is I'd have to cut around that tile and make that plate to be flush with the wall, of course. But forever, they're going to have a modified backsplash now, you know, whereas I think it's easier for homeowners, especially if they were wanted to change their backsplash or update it or do different things. It'd certainly be easier without a cutout on it. So that one was very frustrating. I felt bad.
And it's not just for areas that are using stick built. I mean, if you're using cinder block construction, you're having to do even more additional tasks. Cutting out into that cinder block there's got to be even more strenuous than drilling holes for the frame.
Right, and they set those first floor walls in our hurricane or flood zone areas, and they set those and they put that little, you know, 1/2x1 thing up there so they can run wiring. But when you chip through those walls, there's got to be some sort of a failure rate. You know, they're going to be thinner. You can't be consistent chipping out wall backing. That just can't. And that even though he polyed it really well, you know, that's still going into a porous membrane. It's not a great envelope.
We haven't made wireless power for receptacles just yet, but when we do, you know, I'll either be rich or I'll be dead. I haven't figured that out quite yet. But this does bring up a good point on renovations. Us moving currently away from tornado season and soon to be hurricane season here. We talked at some point or another about a study actually Spear did for Hurricane Harvey. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that was a great study that Spear did after Hurricane Harvey. It's the Houston flood study they did in 2007. And what I enjoyed learning in that study was how what they did was they went down to see homes that had water for several days up the walls, and what the moisture retention of different insulation types were. They did rock wool insulation, fiberglass insulation, spray foam, open cell, and closed cell, and they did all these studies and studied how much mold grew, how wet the sheathing was, how wet the drywall was, stuff like that. Great study. I encourage everybody to read it. But one thing I thought was interesting was the spray foam houses. It said that that spray foam retained no water. It did a great job, stayed dry, but it trapped all that water between the cladding or the sheathing and the spray foam, and so it caused serious degradation to that sheathing. And they used dehumidifiers and fans for over 2 weeks, and it still wouldn't dry out at all. And so what they did was they had two choices. They could either cut out chunks of spray foam and redo the sheathing from there, like take out the T-ply and change it out, or they could pull down all the brick. I don't know what they ended up doing, but they were not going to move that spray foam. If they pulled down all the brick, they wouldn't have to change out the spray foam insulation. So that means that they were never going to change the spray foam because it was too costly. It was just beyond, it was more than taking a house down to its studs, right? And so all that wiring that had sat underwater was going to still be used. And I personally would have hesitated to plug something into an outlet that had sat underwater and it was still hadn't been changed out or checked or nothing, because they couldn't even check it. I thought that was really interesting about spray foam. They couldn't change any of the wiring in the house, and I can surmise that went on to affect their insurability of those homes.
And Randy, if I wanted access to that study, where would I find that?
Yeah, I believe it's listed on our website. If not, I can get you access to that.
Yeah, it's under the reports on your
Yep.
website.
Yep. Sometimes they archive that, but I believe it's still there.
Oh, it's a great picture. How much was this house, would you say? This was in New Mexico a few weeks ago. This was a multi-million-dollar home, just a beautiful
Oh,
home,
yes.
mountains, just gorgeous. And this doesn't do it justice how big that transom window was. But I thought it was funny for the front door. It was almost 4 foot to turn on the light. I thought that was great. Beautiful home.
And for something like this, I mean, being able to have access to that light as soon as you open the door, it's where I would naturally want to move my hand to try to turn on the light versus going all the way in and having to take a leap over to the switches.
Oh, absolutely. But hey, I prefer this to them cutting up that stud pack in any way. So at least they didn't.
Well, but before you go a little bit too further, I mean, they did have to on the back door.
That's right, they did. I forgot that. Oh man. Yeah. I'm not a structural engineer, but as a builder, I can tell you they take those plans so serious. Cutting a stud is never a good idea. And I there are some inspectors that just wouldn't let that fly at all. And that's just awful. But that's on an angle leading out to their back porch. I don't know where else they could have put the switch, but I would be upset if I knew that was there and I was the homeowner. I wouldn't appreciate that.
And this really all is to surmise into how Levven is more than just a smart switch. It's a smarter switch to a better building material. And I want to thank you guys for your time and having us here. I do see in the chat that we had quite a few comments coming on in. I wanted to take some time to do a little bit of that Q&A. And of course, Randy, if you had any questions for Vanessa and I, being able to field any of those from you as well.
Sure. And I before we get to the questions that are in the chat, I just have to say, you and I and Vanessa have talked several times. I've had opportunities to go to your website to try to understand this technology. Seeing this presentation did it for me for multiple reasons of eliminating top plate penetrations, getting more consistent insulation in the walls, not having blank spaces or poly seal to stand in for insulation behind boxes. So it's fascinating to see this. And I was curious as to whether or not you guys have ever done either a comparison or a study that showed what an ACH reduction would look like with one that's completely with this technology and one that is not.
That is,
And go ahead, Vanessa.
I mean, I feel like that's something we're working towards. That is something we've discussed with a few energy ratings. We just haven't settled on it yet, but we've been told off record that there is a difference, but we have not quantified those results yet, to my knowledge. Have we, Sean?
Well, and to expand on that, funny enough, and both you guys will enjoy from the aspect of being an energy rater. There was a home where the energy rater that was doing the blower door got excited to talk to us about it and is a big advocate of ours. He goes, you know, I want to be able to hand you over the energy report to show a comparison between the two houses, but one of the houses wasn't fully ready for a blower door test, and I was scheduled to come on out. And you know, if it passes, it's good enough for me to not have to come back and return. But that got my brain jogging and say, okay, you know, I had the same thoughts as you, Randy. I just want to know what the effect is of having that reduction in top plate penetrations to the drywall, and the effects to the ACH. Because even if it's a 5%, 6, 10, we don't currently know directly. We did do some studies up in Canada where they do build, I want to say, quite differently than they do here in the States, in using a higher R insulation in those homes, because you know they're in one of the coldest regions of North America, but they're also using metal conduits and they're using metal junction boxes that add to that. But here in the stateside, I'd love to see the effect, and we're talking to a couple of our builder partners that are wanting to participate in a study like that and wanting to gather that information with us. So we're hoping here, actually within the next 3 months, to be able to present a comparison between traditionally wired and Levven and seeing the effects to the ACH.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
a very interesting study to see, because as you said, even if it's 5 or 10%, I mean, if you're able to, with the more requirements that are happening for lower ACH, I mean, if you're able to shave off, 5%, 10% by doing this, it's it's something to look at from cost comparison, but it's as y'all alluded to earlier, manufacturers of HVAC equipment, you're allowed to leak 2%.
Mhm.
Windows leak 30% by the way they're manufactured if they're operational. And the way the electrical boxes historically have been installed always leak. It always says in the code, you need to seal your boxes. But we all know PolySeal does just as much as what the installer actually understands that they're trying to do with that. A lot of them see that as, I'm just adding insulation, because they'll spray it on the top where the wires come in, but they won't spray it on the bottom. So they don't understand that that's also an air sealant. They just kind of do what they think they're doing to look like it's been insulated. So removing that part of the equation, it's just a no-brainer, in my opinion.
I agree. I believe it's a no-brainer. I mean, I can remember when blower doors first became a thing. I mean, a regular thing in my area. I think you remember too, Randy. And we saw people trying to caulk the floorboards and caulk the bottom plate and caulk every double stud. I mean, people were doing anything they could to tighten those houses. And I think it just makes perfect sense. The less penetrations, the better. There's less to fix. And I love orange poly, but I think I on it a little too much. I love Aero Barrier, I do, but I can guarantee Caleb over at TNS Solutions would love if we said, oh, well, there's less penetrations. That's less time they're going to be spent, filling that house full of the silicone adhesive to fill all those penetrations. And even though they can seal any penetration up to a ½ inch, they don't really want to. It's going to take a ton of material, a ton of time, and it's just harder.
Well, and I spoke to it a little bit, that if you actually read the code, it says whatever sealing material is being used, it must allow for expansion and contraction of dissimilar material. In my opinion, PolySeal is not the solution. PolySeal does not allow for expansion and contraction without separating or coming loose. So it's not a long-term fix. It's not a long-term solution. It's a means to an end to get to a certain point.
Right.
But it's not there. So to get to what was in there, we did have one person in the chat said, awesome technology. They're asking if we could share the report. So if you guys are okay, I can put the report in with a survey email that Kathy sends out, if that's okay.
That'd be great.
Okay. And then there's also a kudos to the upside and benefits to all this technology, but is concerned with how it connects to the lighting by a key fob signal. Are those subject to possible hacking? And has that been looked at or addressed?
Okay, so from what I understand, the frequency is so low you can't hack it, because that was the concern. Like, we've gone and done demonstrations to builders and whatnot, and one of the things we tell builders is really easy to turn off your lights to each house at the end of the night, because you can just have a whole house shut off and you can turn off the model and whatnot. And they were like, well, how do they not intersect, and how do people, because I don't know if you remember, but there was a short time there where you could have one garage door opener and you could drive down a new construction street and just open every garage door if you wanted to.
Yep.
And people took advantage of that. I mean, little kids could use that to their advantage. This has such a low frequency that it is not interrupted by other frequencies, and it's not hackable. It's done on an internal network so that it can't be infiltrated, but it's not affected by emergency management systems. It's not affected by all other lower radio frequencies.
I guess the concern would be, and maybe, the gentleman that asked this question was also thinking from, we noticed in the demonstration that they were showing an app that can help run that because it's part of your smart home technology. Is
Oh, yeah.
that a concern as being hacked? Not necessarily the fob signal, but how it connects to an online app platform.
What's great about that is the app is on your phone and it does have, cloud features, but no, we haven't had any hacking problems with it, but it also works with the internal, our queue system has the internet within it. So it's not, you can set this up without a builder, without having Wi-Fi already attached to the home is what I'm saying. So, Sean, could you speak to that?
Sorry about that, guys. I lost internet connection there for a second. What was the question?
It's okay. We were actually asking, there was someone on the Q&A section that was asking, they love the upside, the benefits to all this technology. Their concern was, since it has a key fob signal, what's the chances of something like that, or the app being hacked and someone able to control this?
Well, so on two sides of it, the switch itself actually only communicates over to the relay power controller, and the signal itself is encrypted behind a 256 kilobit encryption, where that key I'm going to go into some technical stuff here, but that key is constantly changing. So even if, let's say, a kid out there is using what's called one of the flipper devices that reads off signals, and that's how some cars are being stolen now, where they wait around for you to send a signal from your car key fob to your car, and they scan for that, and it recognizes it. Well, your house itself, the key is constantly changing. Then the communication pathway from the controller over to the smart hub is its separate signal altogether there. And so having access to, let's say, the hub, well, that signal is going to change. So you've got to constantly be trying to connect over and figuring out what that new key is going to be. But if you were to hack into, let's say, the app itself, I mean, it has to be underneath that same account. And there's so many different layers of security and privacy that we've built in, and to one point or another over-engineered. At one point of our development, we had your password requirement to be 14 characters long. And the feedback we got from homeowners was, I don't create a password that's longer than 7 characters by my own choice as is. And so in every aspect of our development, from creating your own account on the app to the actual usage in the home, privacy and security was top of mind. If let's say power goes out, that's one of the things I get asked constantly is, what happens if the power goes out in my house? Well, I mean, what happens with the traditional switch? You're not going to get access to lighting because there's no power running to it. When the power does kick back on, the power controller remembers the position that it was in when the power went out. So if your bedroom light was off, it's going to remain off when the power comes on. But if it was on, as soon as power kicks back in, it's going to be on.
That's great. I mean, so there's no time for it to have to reboot, reset. It's pretty much instantaneous.
That's correct. The only connection that gets interfered with the power going out is your ability to control the lights using the app on your phone. That's just because it's dependent on your router restarting back up and other variables that are just part of having a smart ecosystem. But your actual home functionality, power kicks back on, your switch and your lighting control is automatically back on with it.
Got it. And I think in the conversation, I may be jumping over what you're planning in the future, and I apologize, but didn't we mention something about having temperature sensors in some of the switches? And can you speak to that, or is that just kind of a pie in the sky? That's kind of where we're headed, or is that something that's actively being worked on?
Well, so every single one of our switches today has the ability to read the temperature of the room. We haven't marketed or really talked about that functionality piece because we're developing a true value proposition behind that. But if you were to go inside the Levven app today and take a look at the settings of your switch, it'll tell you what the temperature is of that room. And so a lot of these HVAC companies or smart thermostat companies are offering these $100 sensors that give you the ability to see what the temperature is wherever that sensor is. Well, any builder that builds a home with Levven now has 30, 40, 50 of these sensors inherently built directly into the house. And having that data and knowing what the temperature is by room location, I mean, it's so incredibly valuable that we want to be able to deliver extra value over to the homeowners and seeing that data.
Oh, I see that as a future technology of helpful benefits in air balancing, not really air balancing, but I guess you would have to label it as comfort balancing for the home. You're right. That's fascinating data to have, to be able to have that much granularity to each specific switch in each specific room.
I agree.
It's great.
Yeah, I think that data has huge potential. And other data we will there's a lot of places this technology could go, but I hope that all the data can help with getting kind of the baseline for how this energy efficiency can help. And like I said, not just new home construction, but also renovations. I think that would be really valuable in some of the renovations. My house is 20 some odd years old, and I know that the fluctuation in temperature is incredible.
Well, and
Oh, absolutely.
so when I started doing a retrofit of my house with Levven, I can't be the sales guy for Levven if I don't have it in my own personal home, of course. But as I took the switch plates off, I mean, I was able to find locations in my house where, it being a 20-plus-year-old home, some of the wire sheathing actually had degraded off. I don't know if it was because of how it was installed or if it was just over time. But I mean, one of the wires was completely exposed and actually cracked, where I thought that the light bulbs I bought that continuously flickered, it was part of the light bulbs being an issue. But what I found was, no, it was because I had a fractured hot wire coming into that box, and so the constant amount of power coming in wasn't really connecting there, and so it definitely gave me a lot of insight of things to look out for as I was doing. But to Vanessa's point, this isn't something just for new home construction or even renovations. We've had partners take a look at this and start installing this for multifamily projects. We've had a person be able to install this in their warehouse so they wouldn't have to run the metal conduit across the building just to add additional lighting to their warehouse.
That's a great point. Great point. Another question just popped in. It says, can we also get the report on the installation materials in effect for the moisture hurricane? So Vanessa shared that in the chat, but I think, let me put that in for everybody. There's the Spear website with that information study that was on there. So
really-
last thing I'll ask you real quick, I know we discussed it, and again, I apologize if I'm overstepping technology, but showing that we looked at the code in the very beginning about controls, occupant sensors, things like that. This, hopefully in the future, your technology will be able to connect and those lightings to be controlled by both the online switch and occupant sensors to meet code.
Yes, we're not a big fan of trying to sell the future of what's in our Skunk Works R&D lab, but coming up very soon, we are looking. We do have in production a vacancy occupancy a sensor that includes grabbing in information for humidity, possibly ambient light detection, so understanding how much light is inherently coming into the room and being able to use your lighting to have a balance of how much you're actually putting out. So let's say it's 12 o'clock in the afternoon, full sun coming in through the windows. Do you really need your lighting to be at full 100% output, or could you reduce that down to help mitigate some of that energy consumption there? I don't have a date on when we'd go to market with that, but I can tell you that we're looking to pack as many features into that sensor as possible.
And also wanting to make this a regular component, building component, not just like smart lighting. We want it to be a building component of the house. We want it to be vital to the construction of the home. We're looking at, with bringing in more of a building science take on it, I think we're really looking at a lot of ways to collect data. And to the point you and I've always discussed, Randy, that you've got to have a baseline as far as what you're spending on electricity so that you know if you're saving it, I think we have a lot of possibilities for where we're going to take this technology, and hopefully, humidity sensors, occupancy, all of that's just going to go to the overall efficiency of the home.
Yeah, I mean, and what Sean just spoke to, I mean, that meets directly head on with the top light, side light, daylight zones for commercial. So that's fascinating. So, and this is the reason I invited you guys to do this, was because, we're all about energy efficiency and saving energy, but there are technologies on the way that can help us get there quicker. And this was just one of them. So I can't thank you guys enough for doing a presentation. I appreciate it. Again, I will share the report with everybody through the email from Kathy Lawrence with your survey. Stay tuned for our next webinars that are coming up. If you haven't joined already, if you're on here by a link that was sent to you, you can go on our website for eepartnership.org and sign up for our energy newsletter. We'll have some new webinars coming up soon that will have some additional technology that will show kind of how we can get to this energy efficiency goals that we have a lot quicker. So Vanessa, Sean, thanks again. I appreciate it very much. Thanks for being on here. Thanks for taking your time, and thanks for doing the webinar for us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, Randy, for having us.
You bet. We'll talk soon. Thank you. And thanks everybody for joining us today.
Thank y'all.
Thanks.